Welcome back to Malden's Revolution. I'm Mark Linehan. For our next Patriot Profile, we turn to one of the United States Navy's first heroes, a sailor whose exploits were touted by John Hancock, John Adams, and General Washington himself, and a man whose service, patriotism, and heroism carried his name all the way from Boston to Iwo Jima. I'd like you to meet Captain Daniel Waters. Captain Daniel Waters was born on June 20th, 1731 in the part of Charlestown that is today the city of Somerville, making him 44 years old when the war began. There is not a great deal of information about Daniel Waters before the war. He doesn't appear much, if at all, in town records until June of 1775, when Malden votes that Captain Daniel Waters immediately prepare the cannons for use, and then requests the provincial Congress grant orders to Captain Waters to enlist men to make use of the artillery. But from just these couple mentions in Malden's town meeting minutes, we can reasonably deduce that he had extensive command experience at sea before the war began. One, the fact that he is addressed as captain while having no mention of being previously elected as captain of the militia indicates that his rank was likely earned at sea. Secondly, Captain Waters is then not made the captain of the 2nd Militia Company, but 1 month later, Malden requests that Captain Daniel Waters have orders to command the artillery. Now, allow me to make a humble inference, but choosing someone out of seemingly nowhere to command your artillery would indicate to me that this person has previous experience dealing with cannon, dealing with artillery. And someone from Massachusetts 250 years ago, it is much more likely that they would have experience dealing with cannon and artillery from their time at sea than their time in the militia. But a possible reason for being entrusted with such a serious responsibility during the war while having no public service record at all before the war might make sense if he was frequently absent because he was at sea. Daniel Waters is listed as one of our Minutemen who responded to the Lexington alarm on April 19th. In fact, his name is listed here right underneath our old friend Naylor Hatch. Now, after this is when he's put in charge of preparing our cannon, and then he's found in command of a gunboat on the Charles River, and then on January 20th, 1776, General George Washington orders Captain Daniel Waters to take command of the schooner Lee, named after General Charles Lee. Only 3 weeks after taking command of the Lee, General Washington writes in a letter to John Hancock, who is then the president of the Continental Congress, that Captain Waters has already captured a British vessel. It was the first of many British ships captured by Daniel Waters that helped us end the siege of Boston and win the war. In July of 1777, Waters is captured after a battle involving multiple ships off the coast of Nova Scotia. He's held in New York and is finally exchanged in April of 1778. Captain Waters returns to the sea as soon as a ship became available later that year. Now, in 1779, Captain Daniel Waters participated in the disastrous Penobscot expedition, which was the greatest naval defeat in American history until Pearl Harbor. Captain Waters' account of this disastrous battle actually helped lead to further investigations, courts-martial, and severe consequences for some very well-connected higher-ranking officers. Not bad for a Malden farmer. The most famous engagement of Captain Waters' career was a few months after the Penobscot expedition, when he was put in command of a ship called the Thorn, and just off the coast of Massachusetts, found himself chased by 2 British vessels, both of equal size to, but heavier armed than the Thorn. Waters lured them in close, and when one of the British captains hailed him and shouted, "By what right do you wear the 13 stars on your pendant?" Captain Waters replied, "I'll let you know presently," and fired a broadside within pistol shot range. Firing a broadside means all the guns on one side of his ship fired at once, and pistol shot range is a distance of less than 50 yards. After 10 hours of fighting, both ships had surrendered, though one later managed to escape. John Adams remarked of this engagement, "There has not been a more memorable action this war." John Adams said that about Daniel Waters, not John Paul Jones, the Revolutionary War naval hero we all learned about in school. So next time you hear someone say, "I have not yet begun to fight," you should say, "I'll let you know presently." During this battle, Captain Waters suffered a severe wound in the leg. The damage is described both as having made him lame and also incapacitating him. However, he continued to command ships at sea for the rest of the war. After the war, Captain Waters retired to his farm in Malden, which was located in today's Everett, on the west corner of Ferry Street and Chelsea Street, right next to Captain Benjamin Blaney. But over 100 years after his last command, the name Daniel Waters returned to fight for America at sea. When America declared war on the Central Powers and entered World War I in 1917, we immediately began a massive military buildup, including the construction of hundreds of new vessels for our Navy. To combat the particular threat of German submarines, hundreds of new destroyers were built, including a Wicks-class destroyer named the USS Waters, after Malden's own Daniel Waters. Unlike many of the new ships built for World War I, the USS Waters actually managed to serve before the war ended, crossing the Atlantic 3 times before the armistice. Today, Malden's World War I memorial is located here at Dever Park on the Malden-Medford line. After World War I, the USS Waters was assigned to the West Coast and decommissioned for several years, but then went back to active duty in the 1930s, eventually becoming part of the Navy's Underwater Sound Training School, training sailors in the latest technologies and techniques in anti-submarine warfare, particularly sonar. So if you had a relative who served as a sonar operator in the Pacific during World War II, they may have learned their trade on the USS Waters. After Pearl Harbor, the USS Waters participated in many of the Pacific Theater's island-hopping campaigns, primarily in ferrying supplies and soldiers, but also screening for both air and submarine attacks. During her extensive service in World War II, the USS Waters received 7 battle stars for fighting in campaigns such as the Solomons, Iwo Jima, and the Battle of Okinawa. Thankfully, we have a couple photographs of some of the men who served on the Waters. Here's a picture of the entire crew in 1930, and here's a photo of some of the crew on board during the war in 1943. This photo courtesy of the Library of Congress and the doctor of USS Waters, Dr. Charles Harold Alper. He's the handsome man in the middle of the back row. Malden's World War II memorial is here at Bell Rock Memorial Park on Main Street near the Everett line. Captain Daniel Waters passed away at his Malden farm in 1816, just a few months shy of his 85th birthday. He is buried here in Phipps Street Burying Ground in Charlestown, Massachusetts, his name and legacy of service having been passed down through the centuries, and hundreds of American sailors from both the 18th and 20th centuries can proudly say they served their country with Daniel Waters, a patriot of Malden. But in all seriousness, how cute is this cardigan? Uniqlo, right?